ready with her friends.
Okay. Yeah.
Right,
Well, I tell you
Kim?
what, let's get started so we don't cut ourselves short. And as people join, that's fine. Welcome everybody. Let me introduce you to our very good friend Liana. Liana and I met probably 8 years ago at a program at NYU. One of the great things, you can do that when you're retired. And since that time, we've become great friends. Liana is the most amazing person, I think, one of the most amazing people I've ever met. Not only did she come to this country from Latvia, not speaking a word of English, but she put herself through college. Then she got an MBA from NYU. Then she was an investment banker at JP Morgan and Evercore. Then she decided, oh, it's not for me, and became a vintner. And now she's growing wine, growing grapes all over the world. She's based in Rhode Island, but her vines are pretty much everywhere, I think, from the west coast of the United States to Italy to France to wherever she can find the grapes she wants for the taste she wants. And she's selling tens of thousands of cases every year and just unbelievable success at doing something that she loves. So she's here to share everything she knows about wine, which is an awful lot. Every time we talk, I learn something new, as I did 5 minutes ago. So let me just, today we're going to talk about really everything wine, as the slide says, from everything from taste to buying it, to drinking it, to serving it, to ordering it in a restaurant, just about everything. So Liana, with that, let me just turn it over to you to start where you'd like to start.
Thanks, Erica. Well, you're always very kind with your introduction, so it's overdue. But I do want to correct on one thing. So even though investment banking, I did switch it, it wasn't because it wasn't for me. I don't know how many of you guys know finance people, but I'm sure many of you do, but not a lot of them want to get up and do work in the morning. And that's not how I wanted to spend my days and the rest of my life. There was also, I had a mentor at JP Morgan who gave me this amazing advice as I was about to become a mother. And she said, you better love something that you do so much that, because when these kids are going to wrap their little arms around you and say, Mama, please don't go, you want to be able to walk away and feel good about it. And to me, Gooseneck Vineyards and, every one of our wine bottles is like a child. I never had any qualms or hesitations about walking out of the apartments when my kids were screaming, please don't go, because my other baby needed me. So just a small correction on that part.
No, fair enough.
But I think it's relevant because I think, because with so much love, so I run this with my business partner, and I think the love and passion that we have for what we do shows in every one of the single wine bottles, from picking the people that we work with, to the land, to the grapes, to the final bottle that goes into your glass. So I don't know if we have automatically people on mute, but I know Candace and her friends have the wine bottles in front of them that they're ready to taste with the cheese pairings. I don't know how many other people do, but maybe we'll start with the sparkling. And whoever bought the 6 bottles versus the 3, I think we have 2 sparkling. One is a Brut Rosé and one is a Prosecco. They're both great. Either I use them as aperitifs or dessert drink instead of getting the dessert. And the difference between the two, if you want to pour yourself a little bit, is one is much drier than the other and more complex. So Proseccos have to be made from a specific grape called Glera grape. And the Brut Rosé is made with a little bit of Glera grape, but it's based on a Pinot Noir grape. And that's where more of the complexity and elegance comes from. So again, even though they're both could be used as aperitif or your dessert wine, the Brut Rosé can also be used throughout the entire meal. And you don't really have to think about wine pairings when you drink sparkling wines. So whether it's our wines or you guys are generally in a restaurant not sure what to get, or if you have different things that you're sharing and somebody's getting fish, meat, or sides, sparkling wine is usually a safer choice to go.
Why is that?
So the sugar content doesn't overpower the wine. And I think between the fermentation and the bubbles, it generally makes it a little bit softer.
Mm.
So you still have the grapefruit flavors that the wine delivers, but then the nice balance that the bubbles bring into your mouth kind of diversifies it well. Although that said, now that I'm thinking about my answer, I'll bring Thanksgiving because it's coming up on us pretty quickly. And people always think about, okay, what do we pair with a turkey? What do we buy for Thanksgiving table? And a lot of people, and I think wine stores do the same thing. So Pinot Noir is a big recommendation I hear, which is, it's fine. But one thing I would encourage you guys to think about is if you think about the Thanksgiving table, what do you have on that table? I would think that most of you will have lots of different sides that have a variety of flavors. So picking a pairing or picking a wine to pair with one main dish doesn't make a lot of sense to me, at least. So again, something like sparkling wine will be a safe choice. I would probably stay away from the Prosecco because Prosecco is tends to be less complex and a little sweeter generally, especially the mass market ones. But rosés, especially if you can get a dry rosé, I think it's a pretty good pairing with generally with a lot of sides on the table. So quick aside. I wish I knew how many people are drinking wine so I know how fast to go or have cheeses.
Well, if you want to turn off your mute and tell Liana what you're drinking or how you're drinking, feel free.
And again, I don't know if it's do people have the power to unmute themselves? Just feel free to stop me.
Or put it in the chat.
Okay.
Put it in the chat too.
Whatever works best. So for the cheese pairings for the event, the particular ones we picked, and this is actually a fun game too to play. If you guys are inviting people and you're not sure about if people are going to gel along or you want something more entertaining to do, it's always fun to have them do a little tastings. Like I've seen, you can just put a parchment paper on the table, put different bottles with cheeses in front of them, and have them tasting. So the easiest one to see the difference, and again, like, so you can do either of the three cheeses, you will see they will pair well with any of the sparkling wines. And this is what we talked about earlier, how sparkling wines generally pair pretty well with most dishes. Now, moving on to the next ones will be whites. So I'm going to take a little detour as well. So we'll, the way the wines are lined up, so we'll have sparkling, there's white, and then there are two reds from that 6-bottle package. And generally, some people refer to it as a rainbow, but you do want to think about wines in general from going to lighter to heavier being more complex. So lighter wines starting Pinot Grigio, I would say, would be on one end versus Cabernet Sauvignon is on the other side.
Which of the sparkling should we start with?
So I would probably start with a Prosecco. But again, the best way to do it is to have both of them in a glass next to each other. So you can taste the difference and then probably set it aside. We talked about before also a little bit on the, actually, I think only Candace was on, but how important it is to put the stopper on the sparkling wine. Ironically, even the restaurants, and that's just because of the cost savings, a lot of people just tend to take the stoppers home with them, but even the restaurants don't tend to put the stopper on the sparkling wine. So what happens is as the bubbles evaporate, then the sugar kind of almost settles in, even though it's not that the sugar grows bigger in the bottle. It just, because the bubbles evaporate, you tend to taste the sugar a lot more. So the wine will taste sweeter to you if you leave the bottle open sitting on the table for 2 hours versus what it was meant to be. So again, my big consideration and recommendation for everybody is, one, if you do serve sparkling wine, please make sure that it's cold. It doesn't need to be, freezer cold, but it needs to be cold, that it's sitting in ice the entire time you're serving it, and that it has a proper stopper. And the stopper, as annoying as it is, it's always better to take it off, pour it, put the stopper back on, and put it back in ice. That's how the wine was supposed to be drunk or enjoyed, and that's how it will taste best. The amount of times that I don't know if I know I usually get into things that drive me crazy when I walk into parties, but the amount of times I walk in and I see people serving very expensive champagnes that is room temperature, and no ice provided whatsoever. What happens at that point is that, so in white wines, you have acidity, in red wines, you have tannins. And both of those terms sound like they're terrible and people don't want to hear about them or don't want to think they taste them. But those are basically the heart of each wine. So you cannot have good white wine without acidity, and you cannot have good red wine without tannins. And when the wine is at the wrong temperature, that's all you will be tasting, as opposed to tasting the fruit that it delivers and the elegance that the wine is supposed to bring. And you would get a much nicer, rounder package. Questions? I see there's something going on in the chat. Any questions on the sparkling before I keep going? Feels awkward to keep talking to myself, but any questions from anybody?
I think we have taken care of the chat so far. Yeah.
Great. So, here are our packages. Great. So for the next wines, if you guys are ready or not, but the reason we picked them is because I think it's a nice comparison to if you're just starting to enjoy wine or you are a wine connoisseur. Those are easier to talk about in terms of smell. So people think that, again, the wine, yes, we taste the wine, but we actually smell the wine. And the olfactory senses that we have in our brain is still a mystery. Same way, like the way our brain works. Yes, we think we know, but we really don't. But a majority, 60 to 80% of what we taste comes from the nose. So we do, our mouth and palate and tongue does taste, but those are rudimentary, I wouldn't say even flavors, but just basics. So it's like the sweet, the salty, bitter. And if you want more what the wine is supposed to deliver, you have to smell it. And this is why, even though it looks ridiculous when you swirl the wine, but stick your nose into the glass and smell it. So we have Wickford wine and Sauvignon Blanc, completely two different wines, but they both have an interesting nose. And they both will pair well with any of the three cheeses, but goat cheese specifically.
Liana, let me ask you something. How important is it to swirl the wine?
So
how long do you swirl it? I mean, do you sit there forever and swirl it?
So you don't sit there forever and swirl it. Again, it's just the initial, so it's just the swirling. You do a little bit of it, enough to stick your nose in it, because as soon as you swirl it, the flavors start to come out, and right away you want to put your nose in it, because then it will evaporate very quickly. So that's the whole point. You don't have to do it constantly, especially if a sparkling wine. I would suggest not to do it too much, because then you will let the bubbles leave. So
when you're tasting, I still have one of the sparklings in front of me, but when you're tasting, what are you looking for when you put your nose in and then you follow that up by tasting it? I assume, what are the kinds of things you should be thinking about?
So here's another tip that I recommend a lot to, I think, everybody, including little children. Just always smell everything. Whatever you're eating, smell it. Smell it and ideally pronounce it so your brain can file it away and identify what it is. As simple as, let's say, strawberry smell, to is more complicated with, steak au poivre, so you can get the smell of the beef, or just coming off the charcoal grill, or getting that pepper in there. Because when you put that nose into your wine glass, all those little senses or smells that you've identified before over a period of time, they will pop as soon as you put your nose in. And then you'll smell things that should not even be in the wine glass. I mean, the amount of time, for example, here is Sauvignon Blanc, right? So Sauvignon Blanc, the reason is in this package is because it's the easiest to identify by the smell. Sauvignon Blanc is famous for that grapefruit smell, right? So you have that, New Zealand is probably the easiest one because they're just so heavy on the grapefruit. This is a French Sauvignon Blanc, which is more balanced, but it will still have the grapefruit smell. So sometimes when you describe it, people's like, oh, I'm allergic to grapefruits, I can't have any. I'm like, no, there's no actual grapefruits in there. But again, the more you smell it, so, even if you can have a chance, take a grapefruit juice and, smell that and then grab a Sauvignon Blanc. So,
So how would you describe the Sauvignon Blanc? How would you describe it? In addition to the grapefruit, the base grapefruit smell, what else would you say about yours?
So to me, again, it has a grapefruit smell, but it has a nice elegance and it has some floral notes. So, and this is where once I'm drinking it, like I picture myself, in a field almost in France. Versus, for example, something from New Zealand, all you smell is grapefruit. With red wines, I think this is where you will have more, or, actually even a Pinot Grigio will probably give you a different one because some of them are more lemony, some more honey. So Wickford White, again, and this is why it's nice to do side by side because you'll have a bigger comparison. So Wickford White, and what I smell, this is the other interesting and important things. What I smell is not necessarily what you will smell. Again, Sauvignon Blanc is the easiest one, and it's so general and it's so very specific because the grape has a very particular flavor profile. But in general, if there's any type of ambiguity, your brain will pick whatever it's used to. Again, like we're talking about that sense that comes in, whatever your brain has experienced before, that's what it's going to bring up. So, and this is why my recommendation is always to keep on smelling, because the more you smell, the more sense your brain can identify, whether it's eating or drinking, and that actually improves what you're tasting and drinking. So it elevates your food experience to a whole other level. And, it doesn't take a long time. Sometimes it takes 6 weeks. Sometimes you could do it, again, depends on where you start and depends on the variety, but highly recommend going that route.
So if this Sauvignon Blanc comes from vines in France, what would be the difference from a broad perspective, I know, but what would be the difference from grapes grown in France in a Sauvignon Blanc and grapes grown in California?
Or New Zealand.
Or New Zealand.
So maybe this is probably a good demonstration to the Pinot Noir example. Because so this is a word that probably many of you have heard, but it's called terroir. Terroir for grapes and for wine is the most important thing that can exist because it encompasses such a wide range of factors, including climate, including topography, including winemaking practices sometimes. So this is a picture. Can everybody see the screen, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess, we have the time, so I'll tell the story a little bit. But so what we do at Gooseneck Vineyards is we partner with various farmers all around the world because we believe that terroir is the most important thing for the wine. So we go to where we go find families and people. And another thing that people don't realize is somebody who grows grapes and then somebody who makes the wine. And then when you see the wine in the store, those are very different people and different personalities and different passions. So we go to that person who's the farmer. All he cares about is his land, tending to his vines, which are his babies. Like that's all they want to do. They don't want to care about anything else. So this is who we find. I'm like, you keep doing your thing, we'll just consult with each other and encourage you to pick the grapes when we would like you to pick them, because that also makes a difference. So the longer you keep the grape on the vine, the more sugar it develops inside. The more sugar it develops inside, the more complex it potentially can be. But then you run the risk of mold and various other issues. So there's a fine balance where you want it to have enough sugar, but if you have too much sugar, then you may have too much alcohol. So it's somewhere that within 2-week period where you would have to decide what to do. So, and interestingly enough, so a lot of them for the mass market wines, right? So they'll go to the beginning of the vine, they'll measure, it's called the bricks. So they'll measure the brick inside the grape. But the reality is, and we'll go into the story of these three little bottles and with colors in front of you. What the grape that's in the beginning of the vine may not be the same sugar content that it is in the middle, that it is at the end. So the only proper way to do it is actually, again, if the person is tending to the vines that this is all they do, this is their passion, and this is their entire life, they will go and they'll pick grapes throughout the different rows and different vines to make sure to see where they are consistency wise. So the spread is not as big. So they come closer, they're picked closer to the same sugar content. So back to these 3 bottles on the 3 plastic jars, I would say. So this is 100% Pinot Noir from exactly the same year, from a vineyard in Elkton, Oregon. Elkton is its own AVA. AVA is a designated area by the state government that is more special in one way or another because it demonstrated terroir characteristics for a grape. So, most people know Bordeaux, and within Bordeaux, there are different AVAs of their own, but French they call them their own way. So AVAs is an American term for American vineyards. Elkton, and within it, so River's Edge is the area. So, I mean, I wish I'm going to get this information in terms of blocks, but we're talking about several block square radius of New York City. So not a big area, but take a look at the color difference alone of the Pinot Noir, same grape. There's no mixture. It's picked at exactly the same time. So the color is different. I assure you that the way they taste is very different. And you could see there are 4 bottles. One of them I completely threw out because it was just, the taste was so different. It wasn't even, if you were to take it, it wouldn't even taste like a Pinot Noir to you. It was very funky, nothing wrong with the wine. It's just different. So that just speaks to you. So this is, if we're talking about a small area that can produce such a wide variety of grapes, which will produce in its own a variety of different wines. This is why we talk about terroir. So obviously something that's California versus New Zealand versus France will be such a diverse even within those states. Forget about continents. So it's again, and the difference, what's attributing to the difference? And you could see the pictures are actually from the same day, again, to demonstrate the variability, right, within areas. So you have the fog that rolls in, then there's a little more sun, a little less shade. This is closer to the water. Maybe this is further away from the water. So your vines have to go deeper inside to grab the water. So maybe they're a little bit stronger than the vines that are closer to the river. Any questions on this before we keep going?
Which of these did you choose?
So it's a blend. So I think I did 50, 25, 25. I blended.
How long does that take to figure out?
2 years.
Just to figure out what the right blend is that you want.
That worked for me.
Wow.
Again, does it have to be? No, you could probably go quicker and be done with it. But again, like I'm sure people aggravate a long time picking a child's name or where to send them to school. So this is the child. You want to make sure you get it right. So what and how much should I buy in terms of wine? I get this question asked a lot. If you're entertaining people, a lot of times I see people go in and they ask, whoever the wine store, I have people coming over, what should I buy? Yes, there are people that are really good in terms of giving recommendations, but what I found from my experience, because I do this a lot and I enjoy listening to what advices I hear given and see what people do. So a lot of times you'll get a recommendation the person thinks is a great wine, which is fine, which is okay. You'll hear what unfortunately they have to try to sell more of that month. What people don't think about is that same way, again, going back to there's a variety between one single varietal with the same single year, there's a variety of tastes and palates, right? So whenever you are entertaining, it's going to be definitely people with a variety of taste. So go for wines that are mainstream. So for example, is Sauvignon Blanc mainstream? I wouldn't say that because it's such a strong flavor. So for example, if I am picking Sauvignon Blanc, I wouldn't go for the New Zealand one or the California one. So with the New Zealand one, I know it's very strong in your face grapefruit. California one tends to be high in sugar. So those wines fruitier and they tend to be sweeter. I probably would get something from France. The other thing, again, like people order Sancerre. Sancerre is just a Sauvignon Blanc. Sancerre is an appellation. So the same way, like we talked about, Elkton is an appellation in Oregon, Sancerre is an appellation in France. So if you don't want to pay for the name of Sancerre because it's a small appellation that keeps getting expanded because they're trying to make more money, you can just get a Sauvignon Blanc from France. So Pinot Grigio is usually a safe white wine. From the reds, again, Pinot Noirs, but Pinot Noir, Oregon tends to be, to me, I love it because it's closer to the Burgundies of France, versus a California Pinot Noir tends to be, again, because it's a warmer climate, so it tends to be sweeter. I would probably more fruit forward, so it will come off sweeter too. But I wouldn't get a Cabernet as a kind of everyday entertaining wine. So that will have to be a judgment call depending who you have arriving.
What should you think about? Maybe you're going to get to this, but I know what and how much. But how should you think about pricing, or is that a ridiculous question?
Absolutely not. It's not a ridiculous question at all. I would never buy a wine below $10 in the US. Knowing how much it costs to produce and to bring it in. If you're buying a wine below $10, whether it's on sale or not, I'm sorry, I don't know a better word, but the shit that probably went in there, you do not want to put in your body. Especially like for, Trader Joe's $2 chuck, it terrifies me. Especially knowing a lot of them, for example, are Italian wines, and knowing how much it costs to bring it over across the ocean, bring it here, and to be able to sell it. I don't know what kind of, I do know. Again, don't do it. I think depending where you are, $15 to $20 should give you a decent range. I would go for countries to where the value is. I think you can get a lot from Portugal. Spain tends to be, I guess, a wider range from quality wise. So it's harder to go, but maybe if you learn, so again, the more chances you have tasting what you like, then you could go for the value regions. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, it does.
Okay. So again, like for the same way for the Sauvignon Blanc versus Sancerre, it's like people that like drinking Sancerre, just, get a Sauvignon Blanc and you don't have to spend $30 on a bottle.
Yeah. And why do the California wines have more sugar?
So the warmer it is, the faster the grapes mature, and the faster they have to be picked. But then the sad reality is California wines have added sugar. So I don't know how, a lot of times people that travel to Europe, I hear this all the time. I can't wait to go to Europe so I can finally drink the wine without sulfites because that's giving me a giant headache. And the simple answer is it's not the sulfites, it's the sugar. That sadly now it's even imported wines have added sugar for the American consumer, just because the every day I think our diet is so full of sugar and carbs, that we just crave more sweetness.
So they add the sugar in the fermentation process.
Yep. It's pretty easy to do. Sad but true.
I gather you don't.
No. So, well, the sparkling wines actually everybody does, because so the way sparkling wine is made, so you first ferment it is the first fermentation to make the wine, and then to get the bubbles, you have the second fermentation. So you stop the first fermentation to get the second one going. You have to add a little bit to get it going. So there's a wide range. So our sparkling wines are very low in sugar, versus you have mainstream Prosecco's. I think they approach 20 grams per liter, which is insane to me. And generally for content, for reference purposes, so white wines would probably have, between 3 and 5. And it's an easy one if you guys, for whoever wants to continue wine tastings at home, for Rieslings. That's an easy one to see the difference on. If you go take a Riesling in the store, so there was obviously whoever drinks wine, I'm assuming most people do on this call, there are no ingredients list for purpose, because I think probably the companies, nobody wants to disclose how much sugar is in the bottle. But if you look on the back label, everybody, or sometimes on the front label, you are required to disclose the alcohol percent. So the higher the alcohol, the less sugar there will be. The lower the alcohol, the more sugar there will be. Because if you think about, again, winemaking, it's a fermentation of converting the regular sugars that are inside the grape into alcohol. So at some point you stop the fermentation, right? So you take the sugar content, convert it into alcohol. So if you're taking a wine that has 7-8% alcohol, it will probably have a lot of sugar left. So typical is 12 to 13% for white wines and about 14% for red wines. So the higher the alcohol, unless it's added sugar for California wine. So it's harder to judge. But again, most of the times for Rieslings, it works really well. So you could taste them side by side. In terms of quantities of if you guys are ever wondering, because it's another question I get asked a lot, just think about how much do you expect the person to drink that's coming over. In a typical bottle will have just over 4 glasses. So, and just do the math that way. How many glasses do you think everybody will have?
So if you're serving, I know you're going to get to food in a minute, but if you're serving salty things, like prosciutto or nuts or potato chips or pretzels or whatever those things are.
Yeah.
What is it that goes best with that? Is that reds or whites? Is that,
so I would think about, again, salty is more kind of, to me, it's closer to acidity. So I'm thinking white wines. And again, white wines differ widely. You're going from Pinot Grigio, and I would probably say Chardonnay is on the other end. So I wouldn't pick a Chardonnay with probably potato chips. But again, everybody's palate is going to be very different. And this is if anybody is having goat cheese with their sparkling wine and now having it with their white wines. I hate to do this to you, but if you guys want to take it and then put a sip of the red wine with the goat cheese, the wine is going to taste disgusting, because it's not meant to go with goat cheese. But this is one way you could tell. So you actually have to go and would try to cleanse out the palate. So if you had ginger or some lemon sorbet, you can easily cleanse out the palate. Or another easy way to do it is just keep drinking the wine without cheese, or eat another piece of cheese. So sometimes, like, you have people that have a coffee and then they'll have a glass of wine afterwards and they say, oh, this wine is disgusting. But it's what you have on your palate that's going to affect the flavor a lot.
So what other cheeses besides goat cheese don't work with red wine?
It's not just I think it depends more. Again, I'm going to go back. I know I keep saying this and I'm sorry for this, but again, every person is individual and nobody should allow somebody to tell them like this goes with this or this doesn't go with this. But the best way to find out what goes for your palate is to try and taste different things with different. So I would take that piece of cheese, I would taste it by itself. I would take wine, taste it by itself, and then I would taste them together. This is, again, if to go back to the beginning, if you want to try that parchment paper, put the few bottles, for example, if we have the 6 bottles right now, put the 6 bottles, put different cheeses next to them, and just go and try it and taste it. But keeping in mind that the flavor does last a little bit. So you'd have to, for example, after the goat cheese, maybe take the manchego, make sure that this is what you have now on your palate, not the goat cheese, like goat cheese is gone, and then take the sip of red wine.
Okay.
And this is primarily good. So again, so going back to pairings, and my answer is usually the same: eat what you like, drink what you like. But again, find what works for you. The easiest way to do it is start with simpler wines. Again, think about sweet goes with sweet, and Prosecco, again, something sweeter. Don't think like red wine should only be with meat and white wine should only be with fish. This is a very outdated concept. It just more kind of lighter with lighter, heavier with heavier. So like a Pinot Noir from an Oregon would taste really well with fish, or some really strong, not necessarily fish, but maybe like a swordfish would probably go okay with a light cab. But it's, again, it depends what you guys enjoy, and even that will evolve. So my strong recommendation is keep smelling everything, keep identifying it. Let people think you're crazy. Just keep saying it out loud, whatever you're smelling. Swirl that glass, swirl the nose, and try it with different things on the table. The most fun thing is to do when you have when you're sharing different things, and then you could taste a little bit with a variety of flavors.
So when you're going back to that question, and you started with Thanksgiving and the turkey and the sides, if the main, how do you think about excuse me, where your focus should be if you're thinking about that? So you have beef, but you have, I don't know, what's a light vegetable? Green beans. I don't know. Something light. It's just a trial and error.
No, I do think, like, again, you would go for general, like something that's very versatile. So to me, what's a versatile wine? So something like a dry rosé is a very versatile wine. A sparkling wine is a versatile wine.
I got it.
Maybe a light Pinot Noir. I wouldn't get a Cabernet because you're having a steak, because it's not going to go well with anything else. That's like eating the goat cheese with a cab or with a red blend. It's not going to taste good. Or maybe, leave the wine, eat the little piece of steak between the green beans, but separate the food. But it's also, the reality is I don't want to make everybody feel bad. The reality is people tend to eat quickly and drink quickly. So a lot of times these things go unnoticed. But if we do want to stop and savor what we're eating and drinking.
That's true.
We talked about this. I briefly touched upon this a little bit. But storing and serving the wine is also so important. I see it in restaurants all the time. Red wine should not be at room temperature. Red wine should be cooler, ideally around 55, I would say. If it's not stored in a wine refrigerator for you, I would put it in the refrigerator and not serve it warm. What happens is those tannins that we talked about and the alcohol is what you're tasting when you have a warm red wine. It's another thing. I've been to invited to dinner parties where people have several $100 bottle of wine, but the temperature is absolutely wrong. And then it's tasting like a $12 bottle of wine. So there's absolutely no reason for you to even go and waste the money on a higher end bottle of wine. And same for the whites, like especially the sparkling wines. Now on the whites one, and it goes for the red as well. Like, yes, it should be cold, but if it's too cold, then what happens is all those aromas that should be in the wine, I kind of almost go to sleep. So you're not even smelling them. So if you do put your nose into the glass and there are no aromas of any kind, maybe you have a cold, or maybe the wine is too cold. So the easiest way to warm it up is just to hold the wine in your hands for a quick period of time, and then it should warm up.
So don't put it in the freezer.
Definitely not put it in the freezer. I don't want to scare anybody, but it's almost a living item with the wine inside the bottle. So you don't want to shock it with temperatures. So you want to be able to, again, if you need to cool it, fine, cool it. You could put it into the quickest way, probably I would do an ice bath versus a freezer. So just, let me see if it's here. So instead of doing all ice, do it ice and water. And that usually less than 10 minutes, and it should be fine for serving. Wine in a restaurant. So I told Eric and Karen the story, but I was in a restaurant, at a very nice French restaurant, and a gentleman asked for a sweet Riesling. So with a heavy French accent, he was told that they do not serve sweet Rieslings. So he asked, well, fine, let me try it. He tried it. Of course, he didn't like it. So then the waiter offered a dessert wine that is not too sweet, but would be sweet enough. So the gentleman kind of snuffed at him. How dare he offer him a dessert wine with his meal? And then he proceeded to ask, do you have a Sancerre or a Chardonnay? Now, to put that into one sentence, it's the same asking, like, I want to order something. Well, do you serve a salad or a steak? So the absurdity of those two together, after you've just snubbed the waiter for making the suggestion to you because you wanted a sweet wine, that just doesn't make sense. So Sancerre, first of all, again, Sauvignon Blanc versus a Chardonnay, a very complex wine most of the times, especially in a French restaurant, that pairs with specific things. Versus Sauvignon Blanc versus fruity are probably good with a salad. Or maybe some fish. So
you said, just to stop you for 1 second, the Chardonnay pairs with certain things. What do you think of when you think of Chardonnay and food?
A lot of fish dishes, creamy pastas, summer chicken salad with ranch dressing. I think probably anything creamier on the heavier side, but again, it also depends on the type of Chardonnay, right? So Chardonnays from California tend to be overly oaky. They get put through malolactic fermentation, which converts one type of acid into another. So they are creamier generally, but that overly oaky, which is, it's almost like eating toaster bread. So it's again, that overpowers what the wine is supposed to be. If I'm talking about a general, for example, like our Chardonnay, it's more of a clean, crisp Chardonnay with some floral characteristics. So it's going to match with a lot more things than a typical California Chardonnay. I know it doesn't answer your question, but it's really, again, I'm going to go back to that slide of like, this is 100% Pinot Noir from the same area, from the same region, within the same vineyard, basically. Just 3 different slopes, and it has completely different colors and totally different taste varietals. So Chardonnays will vary from across the world. They will have a wide variety of flavors as well. But generally, it's a heavier wine.
I've seen recently a lot of unoaked Chardonnays.
Yeah.
What is that?
So again, so typical Chardonnay in California. So generally, Chardonnay is fermented longer then white wines don't sit in barrels normally. They're fermented and they're done. They go sit in tanks. But Chardonnays can go into barrels to pick up that oaky flavor. And this is why the Chardonnays tend to be more complex and require, I guess, a bigger dish to be enjoyed with. So now it's kind of like you're skipping that part. So one of the things that's done with California Chardonnays, they also like to save on cost, while it's fermenting in a tank, they get put a lot of oak chips get thrown into the wine. So they're basically just floating around there just to get that oaky flavor. So unoaked is basically just you putting into a tank without exposing it to any oak. Is that too complicated of an answer?
No.
So what wine should I order at restaurant? From my personal experience, a lot of times the waiters are not wine drinkers. So if you ask somebody if there is a sommelier, that's also one thing, but sommeliers, even though they're taught to serve the consumer, it's very hard for them to separate what they like and what they consider to be good versus what consumer is asking for. So I think wine at a restaurant, especially by the glass, is a good time to explore. Like Erica knows, whenever we go out for lunch, I'm like, I haven't tried this. Want to try it? I don't know how it's going to taste, but let's check it out. It's only one glass. You're not buying case. You're not buying a bottle at home. You're not bringing it to anybody. So if you don't like that glass, don't order another one. But this is a great time to try regions as well. And I would highly recommend to go for things that you either normally wouldn't order a bottle of, or something that's different. So for sparkling wines, if you want to try a variety of like different sugar levels, see if there's a cava on the menu. Cremant d'Alsace, which is a different French wine, or, you know, again, French sparkling wine, just not called a champagne, like something that you see has a French name, but it's a sparkling wine. See how you feel about that. Different Italian. I mean, Italy has over 2,000 white wine varietals. So like, try one of those, see what you like. I wouldn't get used to any of them, but just experiment with flavors. See if your brain identifies anything new, any flavors. It's also like, again, if I were starting and I want to expand my wine palette, I would just keep ordering different Sauvignon Blancs from different regions just to see how diverse they are.
That's one question I actually wanted to ask. If you find a white wine, let's just say from a small batch vineyard, it's a small batch.
Yeah. Right.
So you may not find it again. How do you?
For sure.
Yeah,
this is why I said don't get used to it.
Oh,
because a lot of the times, even if you do have something bigger, if it's imported, for example, or I mean, a lot of the wineries do go out of business, even in California, or they get bought out, they change the name. I mean, my best example on this, I don't know if we have Pinot Noir drinkers on the phone, but Meiomi Pinot Noir, it's not as popular now, but I think maybe 7 years ago was one of the most popular Pinot Noirs on the market. Used to be probably around $30 a bottle. Now, Constellation, which is a big wine company, millions of different wine brands, purchased it without the land, without the winemakers, right? Absolutely nothing, no old inventory. They bought the name for $350 million, just the name. Because they knew that chemically they can probably make something close enough and it doesn't really matter. Right? So people who used to drink Pinot Noir, Pinot Noir 7-8 years ago are not drinking the same wine today. I don't know how many of them know. But that's the other thing why I always recommend go for the regions. See what you like. They generally would be similar in flavor, like the Oregon Pinot Noirs, even though, again, you will get a wide variety. But keep trying. I think this is probably one of the most fun things about wine, that you can try and you can keep learning and experimenting. I would have some staples that, you know, again, from shameful pitch, but like with our portfolio, is we are consistent from year to year. So, you know, when you pick up a bottle and you need to bring it somewhere or you need to open them, you'll know exactly what the quality is going to be. And you know what you're serving. So maybe have a few of those staples on hand that you can do the same with, that you can trust. But otherwise, I highly recommend just keep experimenting, keep enjoying. That's part of the process. And one of the great things about wine.
Did they increase the price?
I think they ended up lowering it because either they lost
Oh,
volume.
they lost, yeah. Just curious.
I haven't
So
I
what
haven't
about
been following it.
glasses?
I was just in such a shock when that happened.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
What
When
about glassware? How many glasses do I need?
so I use one for everything. This is so again for a typical, I don't know if you could see it. Well, it's probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, it's kind of like a general, nothing big. So my friends laugh at me because they know when I order sparkling wine in a restaurant, I make sure they never bring it to me in a flute. There is some diversity on that, but most of the people that know wine, for example, sparkling wine is just the same as any other wine. Like it should be enjoyed in a regular glass. I should be able to stick my nose in there. So it was, one of the marketing ideas that started a long time ago to sell you more wine glasses, which now happens. It's like, yes, should the red wine be a little bit of a bigger glass that you can stick your nose in it? Sure. Should the white wines be a little bit smaller? Yes, but otherwise it really does not make much of a difference. So if you have a general wine glass, that it can serve all purposes. Does that help?
It does.
Hopefully there are no wine glass companies on this call that are going to go after me.
Well, the croupes are back,
I love coupes. I love the coupes. Yeah. I mean, but it's just for fun, right? Do you need it? No, but for fun, it's so much fun to drink out of an old style champagne glass, right?
Right.
Yeah, like this is what it used to be. Like, why all of a sudden now sparkling wines have to be done out of a flute? But some people prefer it because it means celebration. So there's something gets triggered in our brain that says celebration.
Probably true.
Do we want to open it up for questions? I mean, I could keep on talking, but
Sure. Let's see. Let's see, anybody has any, I know I've been asking a lot. Let me keep going because I have questions even, and maybe some people will think of some that they have. So when do you, this is a really weird question. I know a lot of people that serve in parties, they serve a nicer wine for the first two glasses and then they go to a less expensive wine. Just to be, which seems kind of funny. I don't know why. I mean, is there a sense, is that true that your taste buds get numb and you would not know that the wine is different? I don't know. It seems odd.
I think you have to be really drunk for you not to taste it. As long as you keep doing it properly. Again, hold the wine glass, put your nose in it, smell it. So there is I guess a terminology where your nose gets used to a certain smell. So for example, I guess the easiest way to explain is sometimes when you walk into a house and you smell something that's not really great, like if you spend 5, 6, 7 minutes, it's different for each person, the smell all of a sudden goes away. The smell doesn't go away, your brain just tells you like it's fine, you don't need to worry about it. So the same thing happens, for example, if you did a wine tasting with 400 wines and you keep smelling the same thing, at some point it won't be able to distinguish it. But none of us, I mean, I do, but I think most people don't have to do that. So I've seen that before. But it goes back to also what are you starting? Well, most people know the difference between the first glass and the third glass to begin with.
Yeah.
Will they take the glass and look at it properly? Will they taste the wine properly? Is it even served at the same temperature? Again, think about that example that I gave with a very expensive red wine bottle, several $100 bottle of wine that's going to taste like a $12 bottle of wine because it's served at the wrong temperature. So there are lots of other factors that also come into play.
So you should be keeping, is there such a thing as a quality boxed wine?
Um, it's coming more. So one of the products that we have, so some of our wines are actually in kegs, and they're served in restaurants out of a tap. I enjoy it. I still think they taste pretty good. I don't think the boxed wine market is still there. There's some smaller producers that are trying, but I think it's harder to find. But again, just take a look at the appellation, see where it's coming from. Take a look at the alcohol content to see, like, if you pick up a box of red wine showing you 8%, there's gonna be a ton of sugar in there. Get ready for a big headache and very sweet wine. And it's probably not good quality, because anybody who's going to serve you wine like that, it's probably not going to be great.
Here's a question.
Yep.
How do you feel about Beaujolais for the holidays?
So I think it's another giant marketing gimmick. They did a fantastic job with their appellation. It's like at some point I think they realized, oh my God, what are we going to do with all this wine? It's like, let's make a big opening party, and here's a release of a new vintage. It's light enough, it's, I think, again, probably light enough for the Thanksgiving table to also pair with all the sides. I think I'm personally more sensitive to the marketing aspect of it, so I try it just to see how it's evolved. But I think the sad part is, because of the marketing that has gone into it, the quality of the Beaujolais have really gone down over the last 10 years.
What's your go-to red?
On what day? How pain in the
What
ass
hour?
for my kids that day? What am I eating? What am I feel like? I think I usually go for, like, I think our cab is very approachable, so you don't need a piece of steak to pair anything with it. So I tend to drink that. I think
I love the Pinot. I love your Pinot.
Yeah,
By the way,
Pinot,
everybody,
Pinot is
it's
nice. That Pinot is great too, because one, it's not overly expensive, and you can just put the cap on it and you have the one glass or two glasses and put it away.
it's delicious, everybody. I'm not being, it's Liana knows it's one of my favorites. It's really good. It's award winning too, I think.
I would second that.
Worth a try if you haven't. I think there are no more questions here. So let me ask this group, since they're not hard, lots and lots of us. We were talking before you got on about how in Rhode Island, Liana can explain it. She's opening a tasting room. I don't know what you're calling it, actually.
It's a winery.
A winery,
Moving our winery. It's a vineyard and a winery. Yep.
And we were thinking about maybe we'd all get together and go up there at some point in the spring or early summer. I don't know how many of you are on the East Coast.
I do. I would recommend, because again, for between our grapes and I think the vineyard that's going to open up 5 minutes from us, I think it'd be more fun if you could try different ones. Again, going on the wine trail, the Rhode Island wine trail. So you could do 3 on one side of the bay and then go try 3 more on the other side of the bay on the Newport side. If you already have
with a car and driver. With a
of
bus.
course, absolutely. Somebody
Bus.
has to. Yes,
Yeah.
It's a bus. I'm talking
Yeah.
about a bus. Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
But send Karen and me a note if you'd be interested in something like that. I think it could be fun to see what's on.
And
the East
until
Coast.
then, you guys can smell everything that you're eating and say it out loud and pretend nobody's judging you, because it's for your own purposes and edification, and for you to taste the food and wine better and elevate your sense of taste.
Can you talk just before we go? Because I did not know this until you told me, and I think you were talking about it before everybody got on. Just about the stoppers for wines. I know you have screw tops on some, but not on others.
So the one that matters, I get for red wines, you could put the cork back in. So that's the easy, but the sparkling wines should always have a stopper. It's, whether you're going to put it back in the fridge, but you should also serve it with a stopper. I
Any
think,
kind of stopper?
I don't know if you could see, let me see. This is the one we have. So if you could find the one that has a closure like this, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Because
That
that
for
those tend to
sparkling
be-
wines.
Yeah, it's for sparkling wines. Yeah, this is ours. There, most of the ones you'll find are the ones that have to go over the neck. I don't think they keep as well, and sometimes I've seen them explode even in restaurants, so kind of like it pops off. Just because, again, like think of sparkling wines as a seltzer bottle that if you keep shaking it up, but if you don't close it properly, it will the water will want to come out. So same with the wine. But I think the worst part about it, again, is like if you keep it open and you keep serving it, the bubbles evaporate, and then you are tasting just mostly the sugar of the wine. So just it's again, it's a disservice to the wine and the producer of not tasting it properly or not enjoying it properly.
Well, I look forward to our next boozy dinner.
Always.
Always. Thank you everybody for joining us. Liana, thank you for doing this. I really
Of
learn
course.
something every time. And I really do
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank
That's
you
great.
very much. Yep.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. I hope you do walk away with something useful from this.
Hopefully
And if you
we'll
want-
see you in the spring.
Yep, and if you want Liana's wine, there's a link. We'll send it out again in the email with the recording. Perfect.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Have a good one.
Thank you.